Matt, appreciate you coming on, man. And this is something that Joe and I have been talking about at length as North Carolina gets ready to introduce mobile sports wagering. The target date is sometime in July. And as this becomes more prolific in other states, we're getting examples of the system working, right? We've seen this in the NFL. Where players have been suspended because of the system working. We saw an Alabama baseball coach just get fired because, again, the system is working. Now it's going to Iowa, where there looks like there's some NCAA sanctions or NCAA problems. But this seems to be different what was going on in Alabama as to what's been going on in Iowa, right?
Oh, yeah, very different. What was happening at Alabama was the integrity of the on-field product, the game itself, potentially being questioned with a coach who may or may not have made a pitching decision and then let somebody else know to place some big bets on the outcome of that very specific game, which is a no-no in every professionalized, every amateur league in the entire world. What we're seeing in Iowa right now is that Iowa gaming regulators don't believe that any Iowa or Iowa State games themselves were compromised, but that dozens of people who legally and through NCAA rules should not have been betting on anything were betting on things. And I would want, I think, audiences to know that what is happening in Iowa right now could happen in literally any other state because the number of athletes who are placing bets on things usually that have nothing to do with college athletics is a massive number. Like the NCAA studied this back in 2016. They brought in some outside groups. They did a major survey across all three divisions. And this was before sports gambling was mostly legalized and ubiquitous everywhere. And they found that about a quarter of all Division I athletes were placing bets somewhere. They're trying to do another study right now, but if it was 1 out of 4 people back when you had to go offshore to go do just about anything, now you can't go on a bus or go anywhere without getting hit with a FanDuel ad. It's got to be more than that. And that's against the rules. And in some places, it might even be criminal. So anybody who's in a position to remind their athletes about what it is and is not permitted needs to be doing that now if you're worried about what's happening in Iowa.
There's also an archaic NCAA rule here in play, Matt, where you're not allowed to bet on a sport that there's a professional version of that the NCAA offers. So if you're an Iowa baseball player, you're not allowed to bet on whoever their favorite team is, the Cubs. You're not allowed to bet on Major League Baseball because a professional version of your sport exists. How asinine is that, Matt?
Yeah, I think I would need a much more convincing argument to explain why we need to drop the hammer on those cases. And my biggest concern, I saw this was mentioned in The Athletic earlier this week. My biggest concern is if you treat that exactly the same as betting on Iowa women's basketball, or worse, betting on Iowa, the sport that you're playing, you're creating a very powerful incentive for both athletes and schools to not self-report and to go out of their way to hide gambling activity, which I think if there's Iowa baseball players who are betting on the NBA playoffs, big picture, as long as they're old enough to legally place a bet, I don't think that's a very big deal. Maybe the NCAA or some other gambling authorities has reasons to believe that that's a gateway to more problematic behavior. If that's true, then I think that needs to be more aggressively, that case needs to be better made in public, but you can't treat them the same, right? Just like you can't throw people into prison for petty misdemeanors and then wonder how they're going to treat the rest of the criminal justice system. Like I hope that what's happening in Iowa is a wake-up call, not just for the conversations that coaches and ADs and operations people are having behind closed doors, but also how we are approaching gambling as a collective here, because we can't put this toothpaste back in the tube.
Well, Matt, speaking of toothpaste, Matt, the NCAA's number one source of income is the NCAA men's basketball tournament.
Yeah, with a bullet.
How do you think that gained any popularity? You know, I'm just going to tell you, Matt. I'm just going to tell you, Joe Ovies, he doesn't love gambling.
I don't.
I do. Not many people do. Okay. Yeah. But it's foolish to sit here and act like the NFL's popularity isn't directly tied to gambling. And it's foolish of the NCAA to sit there and act like the NCAA tournament and everybody and their mother and everybody in their HR department picking a bracket isn't the reason you're cashing checks right now. So pretty please, with sugar on top. I hope the NCAA can recognize this hypocrisy, but you know this much better than I do. For them to change their rules, this archaic rule of you can't bet on a sport that's offered at the professional level that you participate in, like how realistically, how quickly can they change some of their NCAA rules? You know that this doesn't happen fast.
What's frustrating is it doesn't happen fast unless it does. If there's somebody within the ecosystem, if there's the right university president, or if Charlie Baker, I don't know if I'm supposed to call him Governor Baker now or President Baker or Charlie or whatever, if he decides to make this a priority, yeah, it could happen. That could happen relatively quickly. There are ways to kind of navigate the Byzantine bylaw structure to change that rule. The challenge, of course, with any of this is finding like the right two people to say like, I am going to go to the mattresses to get this specific thing changed. Maybe that happens because of this Iowa investigation. Maybe the Iowa investigation triggers some other state regulatory body to go, maybe we should go double check IDs against the names of athletes in our states just to check. And then they're going to realize there's 100 other people. Like, if Ohio decided to do this or New Jersey, God knows you're going to find a bunch of people at Rutgers and St. Peter's and Fairleigh Dickinson who've been betting on the playoffs just because you're
don't you impugn New Jersey, Matt. Everything is legal.
Forgive me, right? Like, and it's a challenge because they're also facing so many other gigantic existential crises right now. I don't know to what extent this becomes the priority, even if I think the three of us agree it probably should be, or at least a priority.
Matt Brown joining us. Extra Points is the newsletter. I highly recommend you subscribe to it. And Matt, I'm going to have to talk to you about how this newsletter stuff works now that we're free. We are just independent contractors now, just trying to make this thing go. So I might have to pick your brain on that.
Yeah. Give me a call when this is done. I'll tell you everything I know for sure.
Please, I need all the secrets. Much like the secrets of the sports book, the part that I found most fascinating and what you wrote yesterday was it made me actually think, who's gambling on college baseball? Right? Like
almost nobody.
Now Joe's making a face. Joe's making a face because Joe's the same guy who was in the pandemic putting bets on Nicaraguan basketball. Shout out to Tippy Tapa. All right. But that's a real team that Joe put money on.
Sure.
But you have to be a special kind of person to be gambling on baseball, because I can't imagine there's that much money moving on baseball, which I guess makes it easy for the authorities to understand. That's how it was flagged, right?
Yep. That's exactly what professional gamblers and people on the sportsbook side have been telling me the past couple of days. Because this is not a world that I'm native to. I don't really gamble myself. And so I've just been calling everybody that I know to explain this to me like I'm 5 because I'm stupid. And what I have been told is this exact thing. Like, one, a lot of books don't offer college baseball at all. And the ones that do, or that let you bet on like the college lacrosse championships or some other NCAA postseason events, will set pretty low limits on the maximum amount that you can bet, unless you're Mayweather, unless you're some kind of like degenerate whale who's losing $25,000 in the casino all of the time. So it's 200 here, 250 there. And even offshore, unless you go through a lot of work, it's hard to place big bets on these kind of things. And I've also been told you generally can't get props. You generally can't get a bunch of other kind of unique action on college baseball. It's just, who's going to win and what's the spread. So you're right. Placing a gigantic bet is something that would telegraph every authority to look a little bit more closely. And my understanding is the Alabama situation was especially stupid in a couple of different ways that made this very easy to catch. And that's how like 4 different states flagged it. You'd have to think eventually somebody would be a little bit more sophisticated, but it would be, from everybody I've talked to, much easier to run this kind of scheme for High Point basketball or for a MAC basketball game than it would be college baseball or a bunch of other sports. And that probably is happening right now. We don't know about it. I feel very confident it's happening with sharing inside injury information.
Okay.
When you say High Point basketball or MAC basketball, you mean someone who wouldn't broadcast it or use their phone, or what do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that, right? Like I think it is, or I have been told rather, it is easier to impact the line or impact what's happening during a college basketball game if you have 1 or 2 guys on the inside than it is for baseball. You're playing more people at once. There's more random chance. You can pay, if you have 2 people in on it, 1 person in on to miss some free throws or be inefficient from the field, it's easier to ensure that someone's not going to cover. But when I say like those particular examples here, we have hundreds of mid-major and low-major college basketball games that are on TV. They're on ESPN3. Anybody can watch them, but you don't have regular beat writers. You don't have a lot of people paying a lot of attention to the ins and outs of the program, and you have so many people in this ecosystem that make no money. Like, forget the athletes. Nobody in the Big South is making big NIL money. They're making NIL money at all. But you've got the director of the director of operations and the student assistants who are making, food stamp money. You've got a couple of full-time assistant coaches who are making less than public school teachers, and then you've got the trainers and people who are making very little money. So for all of these individuals, it's going to be difficult for them to turn down $750 to leak injury information or to leak inside stuff. Not even doing not even doing explicit point shaving. Yeah. If you want to know who's playing in a college basketball game right now, you're going to find out through the lines faster than you are through anything official. Like, that's already very ubiquitous.
Which is why I've argued. Yeah, that's why I've argued for all these years for an injury report standardization in college football, especially now. They need to embrace their gambling overlords, and it needs to be part of it. Because you say MAC, but look in the ACC. None of these coaches share that type of information, and it's not good for you. For the reason you just said, it's not good for you.
No, I completely agree. I understand the FERPA reasons why this isn't happening. I understand that we have empowered college football coaches to be.
Oh, Matt. You just triggered. I just saw it on Joe's face. You just triggered.
I'm sorry.
FERPA. You said FERPA, and he went right back to the North Carolina. The football scandal with Butch Davis.
Sure.
Like, no, FERPA this, FERPA that. They try to use that all the time.
It's a very convenient shieldy for someone to use when they want to, and then suddenly, if the news is bad, I don't know how we just left this manila folder on a reporter's desk. Very strange. But you're right. Like, I think it's bad for anybody that's participating above board in the gaming system, which I think all parties would like to happen. And it provides some really, I think, terrible incentives for both players and people close to the program to do things that are not above board. And a streamlined injury report system for multiple sports, I think, is something that needs to happen, because we can't pretend gambling doesn't exist anymore.
Matt Brown, Extra Points is the newsletter. Highly recommend that you subscribe to it. I do, if you're at all interested in the business of college sports. Maybe even if you're a sicko for mid-major realignment rumors, Matt's got it. He's all over it, man.
Yeah. We want to talk about D2 targets for the A-Sun or who the NEC is sniffing around. I am your Huckleberry. And that's why I need your subscription money to pay for my therapy.
All right, man. Good catching up, man. We'll talk to you later.
No, you bet. And shoot me a DM sometime. I'll be happy to share any kind of newsletter or industry chat if you guys are interested.
I'm learning on the fly, man.
That's all we could do.